Pilgrimage for Brian Haw, a spiritual journey of relevance from the ruins of Barking Abbey to Canterbury Cathedral by Lee D. Miller. That's me. Right, we're at day 6, just come from Eastwell Park and onto Chartham Hatch. And yeah, been in Chartham Hatch and onto the Chapter Arms, going to the pub. Right, in the evening. Right, the Chapter Arms had a very welcoming look to it from its exterior. There was a nice and flowery trestle garden area outside a quintessentially British phone box, sited near to the pub's entrance. It gave the impression of a pub which focused on the restaurant trade, and as I walked in, there were a few groups having meals. I wandered up to the bar and was greeted by the landlord. "Ah, West Ham, what can I get you?" he asked me while initiating conversation with a tone that said banter was imminent. What else have you got? Anything local?" I replied, and then proceeded to look around the bar. Although the pub was kitted out in the usual traditional decor, I noticed a number of items of sporting memorabilia placed at strategic positions around the bar. It was clear from the various items displayed that the proprietor was a keen sportsman or sports fan, and that he was also a Tottenham FC supporter. Tottenham Hotspur. Sorry that I got that wrong. "Are you Tottenham then?" I asked to confirm. "Yeah, but unlike many, I don't mind West Ham, so you're okay in my book," he declared, getting the banter going by giving a kindly dig. "Well, I'm glad to hear it, seeing as you've got our manager and keep half inching our best players. I'm glad you appreciate us," I said with a bit of a comeback. "Yeah, well, they deserve to be at a bigger club, didn't they?" He replied, justifying the player pinching with a short shot hitting me just below the belt. To be honest, at this point, I was already running out of ammunition to throw back at him in the football banter stakes, owing to the fact of West Ham's dire predicament by just being relegated to the Championship and Tottenham's rise to the quarter-finals of the European Cup. At least he hadn't referred to Spurs as being mighty, though. That was certainly a relief. "Well, you can keep Defoe. If he was free, he would cost too much." "Well, you can keep Defoe. If he was free, he'd cost too much," I offered. "Oh no, you can have him back," the landlord said, and we both laughed out loud. As he poured me a pint of ale, we did our introductions, and it turned out that David was indeed a keen sportsman, and he had many stories of liaising with the great and the good from a number of them. He was a very interesting man with a history that appeared to be well lived, and he struck me as someone who was serious but who didn't take himself too seriously. We continued to exchange a number of stories, and he informed me that he had once played rugby for Harlequins way back in the day. I was very impressed and went on to inform him that Harlequins was actually my favourite team when I was younger, because Jason Leonard used to play for them and he was from Barking when I grew up. I then told him I trained with Barking RFC a number of seasons ago and actually managed to play a couple of games for the second team. I loved it, but in one game I was put to cover at fullback and I hadn't got a clue where to position myself. I felt like I had a remote control stuck up my arse for most of the match because I had to listen to everyone on the sidelines directing me where to go. I scored a try though, so it wasn't too bad. I explained. "Well, you do. Where do you play? Normally, on the wing," David deduced. "Yeah, of course. It's easy there. You get the ball and run, or hammer in the tackle," I confirmed. "Thought so. You don't look too big, but you do look fast," he said. "Blimey, you wouldn't have said that if you saw me trying to keep up with a 75-year-old the other day," I thought. "So what were you? A fat boy on the front row then?" I said cheekily and laughed. David laughed too, because it was clear that he wasn't. He was more of a back row forward in the amateur days of rugby, of course. I went on to say that Jason Leonard still popped his head in at Barking Rugby Club sometimes, and that a number of his rugby shirts adorned the walls of the club bar. Immediately after hearing that, David invited me into the other bar of the pub to show me a signed Tottenham shirt he had displayed on the wall and under protective glass. There you go, the mighty Spurs, he declared as we stood by it. God blimey, is there a Tottenham supporter alive that can go for an hour of their lives without saying that phrase? You stick your white flag up your arse, mate. I proclaimed. David laughed once more, and I went on to admit that I actually didn't mind Tottenham too much either, because of their tradition of playing good football, which was much like the tradition of my own West Ham. We fell into mutual respect mode, and David went on to show me other items of interest he had, like cricketing pitches at Lord's and some miscellaneous sporting items. We returned to the main bar, and I noticed that it seemed a bit quieter for a Thursday evening. David informed me that it had been a tough year for business all round. I sympathised that it must be a pretty demanding job to run a public house these days, and David agreed. He went further by saying that with all the regulations and red tape that he had also to deal with, he was considering giving it up altogether. He testified that as much as he enjoyed the job itself, it was starting to feel like it wasn't worth the hassle. That statement made me then come out with something that had been on my mind for years, as I, like many in the British Isles, have observed with aghast the seemingly terminal decline of the licensed public house. It's something that concerns me greatly, and I put forward my hypothesis for the government's continued apathy and blatant encouragement towards a terminal decline. And so I told David, I honestly believe that the government has an agenda to destroy the humble British pub, and you should not sway me from that opinion, I said. Why is that? David asked with a hint of disbelief. Because they appear to do everything they can to introduce more and more red tape, licensing laws and taxes to make pubs more and more difficult to run, so less profitable. And they never seem to make life easier for you. They never make it more practical, less bureaucratic, or reduce the amount of licences you require. And not just for selling alcohol either, but all the bureaucracy you have to abide by for just having music playing on the radio. So, let alone allowing the freedom for people to play music live, I declared. I'm not too sure about that, David said honestly, and not sounding at all convinced. Well, common sense dictates that if you want something to survive, then you support it, and if you want something to eradicate it, then you make life difficult for it, I said, as David began to look a touch more convinced. And I continued, and from the evidence I see, it seems to me that pubs are being attacked via more and more unreasonable legislation by the government and by local authorities, and are not being supported by them in any way. And so that leads me to believe that my statement is true, and there is an agenda to close them down. I see what you mean, David said, 1/4 convinced. It's what I see anyway, and what I also see is that the reason for this potential being the case is because the pub is the one place where everyone, no matter what their background or social standing, can meet to interact, converse with each other. And I don't think the government wants that. What I think the government wants is to actually reduce the amount of opportunities people have to think and to speak with each other, and for everyone to be leading separate lives and separated and divided lives. I think that they want people to be working their nuts off all day long and returning home to their individual boxes at night completely knackered, so that they're all they feel like doing is vegging out in front of the television until they finally go to bed and get ready to start the whole process again the next morning, I said, while entering into lecture mode. I take your point, David said, now seemingly half convinced, but still not completely. I think pubs are amazing places, David, I really do. And then I then announced, now that's something I can agree with, although I'm not sure how much longer my one's going to last, he said with a self-depreciating laugh. Do you know how pubs started in the first place, mate? I asked. No, but I'm sure you're about to tell me. David stated, no, this is how he said it. He said, no, but I'm sure you're about to tell me. David stated quite comically, while raising his eyebrows and rolling his eyes, using a humorous tone to imitate his indifference and boredom at my continued lecture. Oh, he did as well. I cracked up. No, I'm cracking up now. Yeah. I cracked up and really started laughing at his antics. He was a genuinely jolly and funny man. Well, well, if you're going to be like that, I won't bother telling you then, I declared, while still laughing to myself. Oh, go on, tell me, come on, he said, belying his real interest with a smile. All right, basically, during the times in the Middle Ages, when there wasn't clean and reliable water supply for most people, ale was the main source of liquid refreshment for most folk, because the processing of the brewing of the beer cleansed the water and made it fit for consumption. Sometimes a household may produce more than they required for their own use, and when that occurred they put a sign outside of their home, like the swinging signs that still exist outside pubs today, to show that their house was open to the public and that beer was available to be purchased. So in effect, during those moments, their house was a public house. Now, as with everything, there's always going to be some people who are better at producing something than the rest, and obviously some of those folks became very good and efficient at producing their brew, and over a period of time to specialise in that area in order to earn their own living. It's called commerce, I think. And the people that did take this route eventually turned their homes into permanent public houses, and that is where we get the term any institution from. It is also why a traditional English pub has a cosy feel about it, and why their design generally resembles that of someone's living room, I explained. I see, David said with genuine intrigue. At that point, a younger man turned up to serve behind the bar, and David explained that it had been a pleasure to meet me, but he was going to retire to his quarters upstairs. I expressed the same sentiment, and then he took the opportunity to ask if I may purchase a pint of milk off of him. David considered, but then explained that he didn't have any bottles because he bought his milk in industrial sized containers. But if I had a bottle of my own, I could have some. All I had was my litre bottle in hand, and so David took it from me and instructed the newly arrived barman to fill it up. How much would that be? I inquired. Oh, don't worry about that, it's only milk. I've got gallons of the stuff. He kindly replied, and then finally excused himself. That was nice, I thought. The young man came back from filling my litre bottle with milk, and with just under 2 pints in it, and I proceeded to order another pint of ale, while then asking for a water top up too, and getting my book out ready to read. The barman was very helpful and didn't mind taking the time to do all the tasks, as the bar wasn't particularly busy. I accepted the return of my water bottles with the addition of a pint of beer, and then buried my head into my book while feeling at home and extremely comfortable in my temporary surroundings. The barman continued to attempt to make himself look busy, and once all of his initial chores appeared to be completed, he began to engage me in conversation by asking about my book. What are you reading there then? He asked. Oh, it's called The Sun and the Serpent, and it's about these guys who traced the St Michael ley line across southern England during the late 80s. It's a great book, I informed him. He showed further interest, and so I showed him the book, initially by finding the map of the charted line from its beginning at England's most westerly point near Land's End to England's most easterly point in Norfolk. He seemed intrigued and took a closer look at the points it crossed on the map, and as he did so, I continued to explain. Asterisks, Paul Broadhurst and Hamish Miller were the authors of The Sun and the Serpent. It actually runs through a number of spiritually significant sites, including St Michael's Mount, the Cheese Rings in Cornwall, Glastonbury Tor and Overbury Stone Circle, and they all align with the Beltane sunrise on May Day, I said. The barman studied the map and some of the other points on it that I hadn't mentioned, and then suddenly recognised a place that he was familiar with. Borough Mump. I used to go there when I was younger. It was close to where I lived, he said. Are you not from Kent then? I inquired. No, I'm from Somerset originally, and I used to go up the Mump with my girlfriend sometimes, he explained. Do you know what? I've always been meaning to go there, but I haven't got around to it yet. Does it feel a bit special there? Do you feel anything different from normal? I asked. Well, to be honest, I'm not sure really, and I'm not really into that kind of thing. And then he hesitated. But yeah, there was something about it actually. I don't know what exactly, but it was pretty peaceful. That's why me and my girlfriend used to go up there, he explained further. Yeah, but there are a lot of places that feel peaceful. What I mean is, was there something that made it feel different to other places in any way? I expressed the question in a more direct and specific way. Well, like I say, I'm not really into that kind of thing, and I haven't really thought about it before, but yeah, I can only say it does, he answered as honestly as he could. I find it really interesting to hear that, especially from someone who hadn't considered it before. I confirmed that I really wanted to visit the place for myself. He advised me that I should definitely go, and I went on to tell him more about what I'd read in the book while showing him parts of it. The writers of the book were dousing the St. Michael line in order to trace it, to find out where it went, and while doing so they discovered another energy current which followed a similar path and interacted with the St. Michael line as it did so. What they also discovered was the St. Mary line, and they found that the two energy currents represented the masculine and the feminine of the Earth's natural energy field, and whenever the St. Mary ley line crossed the St. Michael current, it created what they called node points. They also found that both currents passed perfectly through a number of Christian churches and monuments dedicated to the saints. They were with the corresponding names. The barman was listening to me avidly while he flicked through my book, and I took hold of the book once more in order to show him a picture of another discovery the men made. Here, look at this, I said with enthusiasm, after finding a page with the diagram of Glastonbury Tor on it and placing it in front of him. When they doused the lines on the tour at Glastonbury, this is what they found. Look at how the two currents interact with each other. They almost form a labyrinth, and it culminates in a St. Michael line forming what looks like a phallus or a penis entering the St. Mary line as it forms what could be described as a womb or a vagina. They appear to marry, and the interaction happens at what is the very top of Glastonbury Tor. I said, "That's amazing," the barman said. "I know, beautiful, eh?" I replied. A couple then came back into the bar and the barman went to serve them. It naturally brought an end to our conversation, and so I decided to engross myself in my book once more. I took my pint and found a table to sit at. I was actually at the point in the book which preceded the Glastonbury Tor revelation, and because I'd been flicking through it to look at the pictures beforehand, I'd already seen some of the information yet to come. But the part of the book that I was just about to read took my intrigue to a new level, as the information appeared to directly associate itself with my pilgrimage, and more specifically to that of the ruins of Barking Abbey.